The examiner's report for descriptive writing lets you know exactly what they're looking at so that you can get full marks. We learned that the best responses included a range of images and details which brought the scene alive in the reader's mind. A range there means that you should be thinking about variety. You can't just focus on one thing and magnify it. You have to give variety for complexity and interest. So think about the 5 senses as a useful starting point. Try to cover all of them, but don't do it in a way that is artificial. Don't have a sight paragraph, a sound paragraph, etc. But do make sure that you do justice to the complexity of the scene you are describing. The feelings of the narrator were often used as devices to create cohesive and well-constructed descriptions. Look how it's not just about what you see or hear or smell or touch or taste. It's also about your reactions to it. So your feelings as a narrator, either third person or first person, can be very useful ways to organize the details that you are describing. Note how they praised answers that were cohesive. That means that they held together well. There was some kind of organization or structure to them. So you mustn't have a list of details that doesn't have a shape. Zooming in or zooming out is one way to give your piece cohesion. You might also choose a detail from the beginning to echo at the end. Sensory images were also skillfully employed at the highest level. Remember, your main job as a descriptive writer is to try and give vivid, precise details that bring a scene to life. Mid-range responses were characterized by more obvious images and ideas, and the sensory impressions given were more mechanically listed and organized in different paragraphs. This means that we don't want a sight paragraph followed by a sound paragraph. As you get closer, if you're zooming in, you might start to notice new sensory details, like maybe when you get finally close enough, you get touch and taste, for example. But that doesn't mean that sight and sound totally drop away. Don't pigeonhole the different senses. You should also be spotting small, fresh, and unusual details, rather than giving obvious ones. In fact, one of the quickest ways to dull your writing, they say, is cliched details. So, when you're proofreading and when you're planning, if you see any cliches, like for example, fluffy clouds like cotton wool, cut it out. Think of a better way to convey the impression. Mid-range answers also failed to develop the thoughts and feelings of the narrator as well as the best ones did. And the description started to become just a list. Note how listing means you're not developing and you're also not shaping. So good answers develop and they also direct the images into a shape. Even weaker responses, again, went for more listing, failed to develop, and they started to tell stories. So we mustn't veer into narrative when describing. Description should focus on a maximum of a 1 minute time frame. Think of each paragraph as being a magnified moment, a snapshot. It's a bit like at the end of The Matrix, for example, when time slows and suddenly you can spot everything. Think of each paragraph being like that. Slow down time. Really focus on things you would normally miss. There shouldn't be over-dramatic details, so not much happens. Description in one way is exciting only because of the way you look at things, not because of what is happening. The weakest writing was typically narrative rather than descriptive and had limited organization and lacked cohesion. So now at the very bottom end of the answers, it's just becoming the opposite of the top. The best responses had precise and varied vocabulary. This is why your verb choices are so important. Cutting out is, was, and were is one of the best ways to add precision. And if you challenge yourself to use different verbs, then you're going to be bringing in the variety you need. Note how they praise technical accuracy, so we must be proofreading very carefully, especially for comma splices, capital letters, basic things like that. In the middle range, vocabulary was less rich and varied. This means you have to avoid repeating words. Don't fall into descriptive ruts where you just overuse the word suddenly, for example. But there was still a fair degree of accuracy in spelling and sentence construction. This is a telling comment because it means that your vocabulary can be just about okay, but as long as you are accurate with the spelling and sentence construction, you're still going to be able to get into the middle range of the mark scheme. However, look what happens as we go down the mark scheme. In weaker responses, as is often the case in descriptive writing, tenses switched between past and present, sometimes within sentences, and incomplete or verbless sentences were common, even in scripts where responses showed a secure grasp of sentence structure. So this means that you must keep your tenses consistent and we need to avoid fragments. So don't say things like just boom or crash or silence. That is what you tend to get in comic books. They're not expecting that type of writing. Get that effect across instead using a very short sentence, perhaps of just 2 or 3 words. If you're going to write in present tense, it can be very effective and make your description vivid, but you must remember not to switch into past tense. Keep your tenses consistent. It's clear that they were very keen on comma splicing being eradicated. A very common weakness here also was the demarcation, that means separation, of sentences with commas rather than full stops. So you must proofread your commas. If either side of a comma is a sentence, change it to a semicolon to fix it, and that will also get you more marks for varying your punctuation. In summary, they say avoid cliches, try to be individual and original with your content. Remember that you are trying to build vivid, precise details, not tell a story. Make sure you always use sentences with proper verbs. There are no special sentence types just for description. And we must be varying vocabulary and sentence structures for effects. The main thing that most people fail to do that would help them get into top band is have some kind of structural or cohesive devices. So use motifs. Make sure there are echoes across your description. Make the end echo the beginning. So the end and the beginning work like bookends that hold up the whole piece of writing in between.